Number of reasons, some airlines saying investment, strong dollar, also hedging and fair value. Let's talk to Seth Kaplan. He's a managing partner of Airline Weekly. He joins me now from Fort Lauderdale. Thank you for being with me, sir. I gotta say, it really feels like the consumer is being ripped off.
Yeah, it can feel like that, can't it? But, you know, really the key, and something the airlines didn't quite touch on, is that the simple fact is that the airline business, like many businesses, is not really a cost-plus business. It's not as if the airlines just sort of add up all their costs, you know, the aircraft, the pilots, the fuel, and the rest of it, and then add some margin and charge people something beyond that. And for most of their history, that actually worked against them. I mean, a decade ago, Poppy, the airlines, especially those U.S. airlines that were quite literally bankrupt, were saying, you know, we can't manage to pass these rising fuel costs through the consumers. So they restructured the industry to their benefit, and right now they're kind of reaping a bumper crop, basically operating in an environment that's a bit more as if fuel were still expensive, even though it's not.
I get it, but we have seen some of the airlines and major carriers in this country adding some capacity, right, which they cut back with higher prices. And I guess the question becomes, this can only continue so long as the entire industry works in tandem and no one sort of jumps the boat and starts really cutting their prices.
Right, Poppy. And, you know, while on one hand, the airlines are trying to reassure consumers, hey, we're not trying to rip you off. On the other hand, they're telling investors, you know, we're not going to become undisciplined about capacity, as you mentioned, because really that's the key. In the end, this is supply and demand economics. Right. You know, you cannot charge people more than they're willing or able to pay. So they're saying, look, we're not going to start adding more seats, but looking into the coming months, let me tell you, we're seeing the airlines actually adding more seats. And Poppy, that, not the generosity of airlines, but additional capacity, simple supply and demand, is what would indeed put downward pressure on ticket prices rather going forward.
You know, and also in defense of the industry here, as I was just in defense of we the consumer, it's going to take a long time for them to forget the recent memory of what it feels like to be in bankruptcy.
It sure will, and they really, you know, used that as a springboard. The bankruptcy, first of all, to cut costs in very painful ways for especially their employees, but also other stakeholders. And then they said, you know, let's restructure this thing in a way that we can survive in almost any kind of environment, Poppy. And it's really remarkable. You know, a decade ago, the then CFO of Delta Airlines said, as oil was, you know, going up, said, you know, there's no airline, rather, that's set up to make money at 50 or 60 a dollar barrel. And I mean, nobody doubted that at the time. They managed to change things in their favor to a situation where they could make money at $100 oil. I mean, that's the very same airline, Delta, made $3 billion with oil near $100 a barrel last year. So, you know, really impressive what they achieved. And they're basically saying, you know what, if we have a few months, and that's really what it's been at this point, of some outsized profits, you know, we're not really going to apologize for that, even if they don't quite say it that way. But, you know, the other irony, Poppy, is that low fuel prices in some ways are actually partly responsible for high airfares, because let's not forget, in the U.S., the economy is good. Consumers have more money in their pockets because of low gas prices at the pump, and that in turn actually bids up the price of air travel.
And we have no choice. When we got to fly somewhere, we got to fly somewhere, especially businesses paying very high fares for those last-minute tickets. Thank you very much, Seth. Good to have you on the program, sir. We appreciate it. Coming up next, streaming